Hi everybody, this is Armen from ArmensCraftRoom. Thank you for joining me today. This is week 2 of the run-up to Christmas Hop 2023. If you'd like to see what type of ink blended Christmas card I make, please stick around. Alright, for today's project, we are going to make the Welcome Winter Sled etched dies from the Celebrate the Season collection over at Spellbinders. I do have all the die cuts pre-assembled, plus some additional snowflake dies from a Recollections die set. And the snowflakes are cut into white glitter paper. Here you can see they've got some sparkle. The sled is in some foil paper by Recollections, some real red poinsettias, that cardstocks from Stampin' Up, garden green for the green accents and Stampin' Up. The skates and laces are in the Gold Shimmer paper from Recollections. And the wooden sled pieces are a retired colored chocolate chip from Stampin' Up. And I've got some leaf veins here from So Saffron, also a retired Stampin' Up color. In addition to the die cuts, we're going to use the Altenew ink blending tool, size small. And we're also going to use some blending brushes with the handles. And we'll have the coordinating inks, both the retired inks from Stampin' Up and the current edition inks from Stampin' Up. Also going to need a paper trimmer, a score tool, and a bone folder, as well as some white cardstock. To make the white cardstock base, I'd like a card that opens up like this. So to cut that, we're going to bring out the extended arm and grab our 8.5 inch by 11 inch white cardstock. This is 110 pound, and we're going to cut it at the 4 1/4 mark. And then we'll rotate the paper, and then we'll score it at the 5.5 mark. And we'll do this score for both sheets. You can also score the entire sheet first and then cut, and that's a little bit faster if you don't mind cutting through the scored ridge. Alright, so I'll set the paper trimmer aside. We don't need this for the rest of the project. And then to fold, you're going to have a valley dip and a mountain dip for the score. With the mountain dip side up, we're then going to fold the card in half so the two short ends meet evenly. Fold the short ends down, grab the bone folder, and really crease into that card so it will lay flat. Again, flip it over so the valley side is down, mountain side is up, and then fold over, meeting the short edges, crease down with the bone folder. And that's all that you need the bone folder for today. So now that we have our card bases, we can go ahead and start ink blending, because we're going to have something to attach to that. I like to bring any sheet of scratch white paper. You can also ink blend directly on the silicone mat, and then you could spray that with water and collect any extra ink for maybe a background. I'm not needing a background today, so we're just going to blend. I'm going to bring all my pieces over and sort them out. The snowflakes, I don't need to ink blend. I also don't need to ink blend the sleds. I do have enough pieces here to make 2. And when you cut out the sled, you're going to get these rectangular silver die cuts. You can save these for another project. They can be used in maybe some type of quilted thing, or edging a small piece. Also cut out in the silver were the ice skating blades, and also the front piece of ice skating blades. We're missing one. Up here it is. When you're looking for foil for this project, I like the Recollections because it has this like paper backing in it, so it makes it really easy to glue down to your project, and also it kind of helps protect you from seeing the glue on the front side. A lot of times with the foil papers that don't have that backing, you'll see a ridge where the glue was, and I prefer not to see that. Also, I don't need to ink blend the either part of the ice skates or the shoelaces, so I'm going to set them aside as well. And we've got all of our pieces here. we are going to build this up piece by piece, and then we'll assemble it directly onto the card. So all the stuff that doesn't need ink blender we'll just scoop away. I'm going to start with the lighter colors, and that's going to be So Saffron. This is a very old ink pad. And we'll grab out one of the small Altenew brushes. These are really nice. They have a real nice soft feel. It's a good quality brush. And then I'm going to bring out all my little tree veins here and set them aside. And then we'll ink up, you'll see we'll ink up our little brush, and then we'll start off the project and we'll ink blend on. And I'm coming from the outer edges because I want to keep the center lighter if possible. This one's a pretty small. We could use a detailed brush too, but I prefer how these feel in the hands. It's a personal preference how big of a brush you'd like to use. You could just honestly dye the entire thing if you want. It's your project. Then I'm going to kind of rub off the little extra yellow here and get that ready. If you start light and go dark, you can use the same ink blending brush if you would like. If you start dark, then it starts getting complicated. And I'm going to grab extra paper here to just keep cleaning this. So I think I'm pretty happy with how these look. It's a little bit shaded, but not too much, and you have a little bit of distinction there in the colors on the tips. And I think that that's about all that's needed. This is a really fine detail on the project. It's not one of the majorly big pieces. So we are going to be stacking other things over top of this as well. So keep that in mind when you're spending time ink blending. You want to maybe focus on the pieces that are the most forward facing if you're limited on time, or if you're just not super into ink blending. There are a lot of things you can do if you're like really into it. Now the sled pieces are really cool because when they cut out, they also emboss. So you can see there's little ridges like wood plank in here. This kind of dye is awesome for ink blending because when you ink blend over this, you're going to get more depth through those ridges. And you can choose to ink blend with the same color or even maybe something darker. Now there's also these little holes that cut out for where screws would be. This die set does come with some very small circle dies that would cover this up, where you would use the foil paper and you could get like the screws coming out of that. That's too tedious for me. I'm not into that intense of a die cut. So what I'm going to do is assemble this, and then I'm going to use liquid pearls in a metallic color to fill in all these holes for the screws, because that's going to be much faster and easier for me, and I won't have to use as many tweezers. And also I don't have to worry necessarily how many of these holes pop out. So go ahead and grab your sled. We're going to want to go piece by piece. I do like this small ink blending brush. They do make the detailed brushes, which are very small. They could also work for this as well. It just depends how fast you want to ink blend. If you're going for quick and easy, you might want to go for the size small. If you're going for very detailed and spending a lot of time, then I would recommend these detailed ones because they are smaller and they are going to give you a little bit more control over where that blend is going to be going. These brushes are washable with some very gentle soap and water. So that's always awesome because then you don't have to have one for every color if you don't want to. These are higher end brushes. I will post down below a referral link if you're new to Altenew and you'd like to give them a try. That'll give you a new customer coupon. So we'll just ink up our small brush, go off a little, and then just hitting the edges. I do want this color all over, but mainly on the outer edges for the wear and tear. And so you'll get a little bit, you can see around the edges a little more. Then there's these other tools you can get, like the wooden handle ones with the foam. This one I use for gold ink, it's pigment ink. Then you can have these Velcro on and off, so you can have so many of these. They're really great. Just want to tap, there's nothing on there, and then I'm going to tap it into the charcoal, or excuse me, into the chocolate chip, And then I'm gonna very lightly rub it over top of this paper here. Super light, just wanna get in on the higher parts of that green. And we'll bring in 2 pieces of the cardstock here for you to see the difference. So the one on the right has had the ink blending, one on the left has not. So we get a little bit more depth of color on the ink blended one than here on the untouched, just plain cardstock. So up to you how you want to assemble this. Absolutely adorable even if you don't ink blend. But we are ink blending today because that is part of the fun theme for this card. So we're going to ink blend edges with the light brush. The reason I'm using 2 different brushes is this really light one, these bristles are really movable, so they are going to get into every tiny crevice, and if I were to use that over the whole thing, they would just dye the entire plank. This foam is straight, it's more rigid, so it's great for going over embossed anything. So even if you have an embossing folder, if you just go over the edge very lightly, it'll capture the raised edges and dye them with your ink, and not anything that is lower down into the paper, which gives you a lot of extra depth in your project. So I'm just very lightly hovering over. Now I'm going to go through and do all of these chocolate chip cardstocks, and then I'll meet you back here for the other pieces. Alright, so now I've completed all the ink blending on the wooden sled pieces. This is enough for 2 sleds. And I did wash my hands after this. Recommend that if you get ink on your hands. Alright, let's see. The camera is having some trouble focusing here. Yep, there you go. So you can see the wood blend marks there. I do recommend kind of smooshing off any residual ink off of your blending tools just before you clean them, because here's the thing. Unless you're going to stop mid-project and like go scrub all these out, you're going to have them somewhere on your desk. The least amount of ink possible on the exterior is going to be a major benefit, because if you bump this into some other project or something, you don't necessarily want this really dark color potentially getting on your project. Also, if you had a silicone mat, I would suggest wiping the mat down before each use. This I'm going to set aside. It can dry up, and then I can use it on the other side for another ink blend project. And I have tons of this random scrap paper that's really thin, and I wouldn't use this in making a card. It's more like a little bit thicker than computer paper. It's a lot of packaged goods crafty goods will sometimes come with paper. Also, I like to scrapbook, and inside the scrapbook pages, they put a lighter weight 12 by 12 paper that I usually cut down for stuff like this, because I put thicker cardstock in my card sheets than what they provide. So just food for thoughts on how to get these extra sheets. And we'll set aside the completed wooden planks, and then we'll move on to the garden green products. And so rather new ink pad. I am going to get a new blending brush, and these I think are a little bit bigger than I would prefer for the leaves because they're very narrow. So I do want to get kind of more depth off these poinsettia leaves than I would off the small. If you look at the size, it's a huge difference. So for this one, I'm going to break out the detailed brushes. And probably going to go for the medium size one. As you can see, I do this one for a lot of flowers. It is pretty green already. Not a lot of green left in there. So we're going to go through. We've got some holly leaves. These don't have any embossing on them. They come out flat. And then we've also got some of these pine sprigs that we're going to do in green. The poinsettia we're going to do in real red. I'm going to use the same brush for that. But I think let's start with the green first, and we'll go from there. So you just want to lightly dab. This is a super new ink pad, very juicy. Stampin' Up! Ink pads always come real juicy. I tap off a few times, and then I'm going to start on the edges and work my way around. Now don't forget on this leaf, the reason you don't have any embossing is because you're adding the yellow spine to it, and that's going to give you that extra detail. You can get a couple leaves, and I like to do that because you have kind of the first run of the ink off the blending brush on one leaf, and then the second run on the second leaf, so you get a little bit different color depth. If we move these to a cleaner sheet, you can see the edges here. This one was the first round. It's much darker, and this one's a little bit lighter. I like the distinction. I think it adds depth to the project. I don't like them all to be 100% identical. I think in nature we have a lot of differences, and this kind of should celebrate that with handmade. That's one of the specialties when you're doing these handmade projects, is that you can get something different than a manufacturer. You're not making every piece the same. It may have the same components, but because you're doing this by hand, it's going to look a little different. And I just tapped it off a few extra times to get a little lighter, since I dipped it in the ink forgetting I was doing the second round. For the splotchiness in the middle, I like to really tap off quite light and then just gently, kind of like a sponge dauber. You can use a sponge dauber for this if you want to. I prefer the brushes. They have more of a handle. And then by tapping lightly, getting a little bit of extra texture there in the center. Now, keeping with my green scratch paper here, just gonna move these to the side, and then I'm gonna bring in, this little guy doesn't want to go on the card, I'm gonna bring in the pine. One thing to think about with these delicate die cuts is they've got some really thin bristles, and silicone mounts by nature when clean are a little bit sticky, which is absolutely wonderful for some projects. The die cuts though, if they get a little bit too stuck on your mat, they can get complicated to pull up, and if they're very delicate, they may tear. So that's why I prefer to do the very thin ones on my paper versus direct on the mat. If this were a larger piece that was more card sized or whatever, I would prefer to do it direct on the mat and then get the background ink off of it. But this one I've had experience tearing trying to get off the silicone, and that's not good because I spent a lot of time die cutting. So same thing, tap off and then brush on to the outer edges and try to get in a little bit to the centers as well of these pine needles. You do want to have some distinction. We can come back in here with some of that chocolate chip if you'd like down the middle for like a branch look. I'm not going to do that, but that is an option if you like that look. You could also color the branch part in with a marker, and Stampin' Up! Does sell a couple kinds of markers in the ink pads, same color. You can get them in the alcohol blends, or you can get them in the Stampin' Write markers, which are the same as the ink pad dye ink. I think they're great markers, especially for projects like this if you wanted to bring multiple colors in. And I think just as an example, I might do one card with that and one without, just to kind of show you the difference here. So just blending in the leaves. One side's quite a bit darker here, so I'll darken that up. And then I am going to just kind of blot my ink on top of all the other ones, just to give it a little distinction so they're not all identical as far as the paper. And then we'll kind of clean this brush off a little, rubbing the green off. This amount of green on a red ink pad, especially because they're in this like a similar depth, isn't going to be a real big problem. And you know, you want to make sure that you clean it to the point where you don't have to worry about getting a dark green spot in the middle of your red ink pad. So if you'd like to take the markers, they do have a lot of markers. I don't have chocolate chip because that is a required color, but I do have early espresso. This is what they look like, Stampin' Write. I don't have the alcohol marker in this color, but I do have the die, and they come with a brush tip, and the new ones come with a better nib here. This is an old one with a fine writer, so you can choose how you'd like to color this, but we'll just do a couple. I'm going to lightly just brush this along the middle, and we'll take two that have some darker leaves here. Kind of give you a two-tone look, and then that way at the end you'll see two different versions of this card, one that's had the branches put back into the pine and one without. And just putting my marker case away here, and we'll slide over here. The back of the card that I've already got these poinsettias on, I'm just going to ink blend directly onto this. I think that's perfectly fine. We'll open up the red ink. And just, you know, another rub here. If you get ink on yourself, definitely good to towel that off the best you can. Do wash hands in between each ink project if it's real bad. That way you don't get ink into other stuff. So just very lightly tap, super juicy ink pad. And then we'll come around the edges and kind of darken it up a bit. This is a layered flower, so we are using 2 pieces of poinsettia per project to get that layered look. So tap off, and then we'll blend on the exterior. And just want to get like a little bit on the edges here just to give some extra depth and shadowing later on when they're stacked. Tap off. All right, now I like to go through and try to make these kind of similar, just because we do layer them up. And so we've got the edges. I'm going to, there's not too much ink on that, I'm going to start tapping the floral leaves to give it kind of a sponged look and see what kind of different shades we can get out of that. And then of course, when done, always close up the ink pad. All right, I'm gonna go wash my hands because I'm now covered in ink, and then I'll meet you back here and we will assemble this sled and get it on our card base. All right, I'm gonna get ready to glue this on. There's a few options. They do sell adhesive sheets that you could put directly on the cardstock before die cutting. You can also purchase this artist tack. Comes in 8.5 by 11 sheets. You can get this off Amazon, and that's what I'm going to use, so I'll show you that. Another glue option would be this Tombow Mono Liquid Glue. I think this one works out really great. This is an extra large one, and I put it into a different bottle with a fine tip for these little die cuts. And if you want to have your glue always ready, either the fine tip the fine tip one, you can get like a small holder that holds it down. They have larger ones that look a little bit more like a sloped thing that you can put a full size glue in, and that'll do the same thing. So there's a few options for glue, of course. Pick the one that works the best for you or the one that you already have. Pretty much any glue is going to work for this. Glue tape will be a little more challenging on some of these pieces because they are smaller. The glue tape probably work okay on some of the wooden planks just because they're a bit wider. But I'm going to show you how to use this artist tack. I really like this stuff. It's pretty quick and simple, and you can get quite a bit of glue. So you do have to separate the sheets, and then you'll feel one side is like wax and the other side has these tiny little glue dots. I don't know if you can capture them on film. They're micro. So you just want to pull off part of your sheet. And then I want to build the flowers first. So I'm going to put only 2 of them because I don't want to put them on my card yet. So we'll put 2 down. They're nice and red, easy to see. And then you use like any scraper tool or your hands. You're going to rub in here and really smush them into this glue. I have a Cricut scraper tool because I do use a Cricut sometimes. And then you pull back the wax paper. You're very stuck down here. So we're going to grab one of the bottom poinsettias and then just gently peel the flower off your glue paper. You want to go slow there because you are going to get like this extra glue. And I generally just run a tool through there. This is a little Cricut spatula, just between to try to encourage any extra hanging off glues to go back underneath. And don't worry about it, because you know what? They make these adhesive erasers that are super great. So if you get some on the top of your project, you just go through and clean it up with that and it won't tear the paper or anything. So we want to line up so the middle dots are touching and the petals are offset to give some depth here. And then we'll pull this up. Now do remember, on the back of this flower, you are going to have a few petals with glue and not without glue, simply because we had to glue the whole thing on that. This is fine because we are going to glue this down where all of it's going to need to be glued. So just don't press it. If you have a silicone mat, glue doesn't stick to this, so you can push it down as much as you want and you'll still be able to pull it up later. If you have paper, just be very careful. And we'll grab the other flower and we'll set that down here. And then very carefully lift the second glued flower off. And again, you can kind of see maybe where there's some glue in here. Just go in with an easy to clean tool and break that glue apart so that it's a little bit, you know, if you don't break this apart, you're gonna have to erase a lot of glue later. So it's easier to break it apart and erase a little bit. Then we'll line up the centers again, press that one down. So both our poinsettias are started. They have extra things you can put on top of the poinsettias, little circles and whatnot. I'm gonna do something a little different with this card than as directed on the outside sheet. Next up, we're gonna do the holly leaves. So the leaves themselves are, I don't want to have the glue on the back yet, so we're going to put the yellow So Saffron needles in there. These I'm going to do one by one because if they get really stuck in here with all these little fine nodules, they will be a little bit more challenging to get off this paper. You can continue to put it in the same spot, trying to get less glue. Because they're micro dots, anything where there was a hole in your other project, there will be some dots left on this sheet, but maybe not all of them. And if you really lay this out in light, sometimes you can see it. Like this end isn't sticking down very well, so I can tell that wasn't in glue, but I really need that to be glued. So we'll take this off, and you can see there's quite a bit of glue around here, so we'll just run our tool through to help rearrange where that little glue is sitting. And then we'll come down to one of the holly leaves and we'll lay our spine in there. Now, all right, we've got a little bit of extra. Could also, before I glue this up, I'll show you, you can glue these together however you like. I mean, they have a sample on the front of the package that can look how you want. You could even layer these up if you wanted, whatever made you happy. And I liked them on the holly leaves. So we'll glue in another one, a different spot of the paper here, and you scrape down, and then you just keep going. Alright, so the holly leaves and poinsettias are assembled, and it gets a little trickier from here. So you want to think about what is the base layer that's going to go on the card, and that's the metal sled, basically all the pieces, the components that if this were a real sled that would be there too. And what we want to do before we get any glue involved is we want to take all of our pieces, which I did have in order until I set the top of my die cutter down and it static clung them all over the place, so I had to basically reorganize. So the tallest one is going to be in the center, and you're going to have some end pieces and some smaller ones in the middle there that kind of hook it together. Oh no, that's not right, sorry. Here we go. I'm a little bit glued up from that glue paper, so everything's sticking. So they do have, like this piece here, this is the top of the sled. And if you look carefully, you can see these little marks, the little holes. And that's where you're lining up your stuff. So if you see these little divot holes, you would not glue a rivet there off the die because this is the bottom. So what it's telling you to do is say this piece also has holes in it, right? So you're going to pull this up, and this is the front. So you're going to line up where the two holes are and continue to go from there. And you'll have the center piece is the longest. That's going to line up here and here. And you're going to build it like that. I'm going to lay them all out on the paper first so that we know what order we want to glue them in. And for this one, I'm actually not going to use the artist tack because then we're going to have a lot of extra glue all over the place. I'm going to use some liquid glue, and we'll put a block over top to weight our product, just like a regular acrylic block, a clean one. Make sure it's clean. You don't want to ruin your project. So just wanted to point out where those little notches are so that you can line this up when you go to assemble it. And you should have, if you're die cutting and you don't get a static electricity issue like I did when I set my clear top on it, then everything should line up and be in order for you, to look kind of like this here, with the top. And then the leaves, the pine leaves, the holly leaves, and the poinsettia, they're all going to go up here on top and like make a beautiful spray over this sled. So you do not have to worry about some of these pieces that look like they're uncovered. They will not be uncovered when we get through with this project. And of course, you can always refer to your packaging or to their website if you're looking for how to assemble this. I've got 2 sled pieces, 2 sleds. We do have some skates to hang off this as well. So we're going to build all the components for one, and then we are going to go back and assemble everything on top of the sled as we go. So just to make this a little quicker, I'm going to take my glue, and everywhere where I see one of these dots, one of these screw dots, I'm going to put a dab of glue down. And that's honestly, that's where I want to put all of my pieces and line them up. I also want to make sure I get glue on these non-dotted ones too, but I want to kind of see first where I'm lining up. I'm going to start with the one in the middle, and we're just going to make a little line. It's okay if your glue gets off a little bit, you know, onto this paper, as long as you pick it up before it dries and you get it on the silicone, because the thing is, like, you are going to go through this and post this onto a card. So now this is, we want to get a little under here and just kind of gauge how far out that's going to go. It's a little difficult to see on camera, I would think, because it's so fine, but the wonderful thing about this Tombow mono glue is it doesn't dry white, it dries clear. It's a really nice glue for die cuts. And then the top one, the this very top emboss mark, that's for where we're going to put like the poinsettia and the skates, so you don't want to glue up there just yet. So I'm going to glue here. I want to get nice and glued, and I want to line up. Oh, I missed a notch, sorry. These embossed ones here are for the top. The very top peak one is going to be where your other products go through. So you line up your little holes, grab them. Like I said, it's okay if there's a little bit of glue everywhere, just kind of get the paper lined up. This one does not want to stay down. There's not enough stuff to glue on it, so I'm going to plop that one down for a second with a block. Blocks are washable. You are definitely going to wash it after this project. So this one here, because it's going to be centered between the side and the middle, I actually want to put the next big one on, put those on last. These are great because you're going to go from this notch here all the way down to the other notch. So we're going to put a little dot here and there throughout. So obviously when you notch directly on the original screw hole, that's where there's a hole in the paper, so the glue goes right through, but you want to get the rest of the glue down, so that's where the paper is going to lay. And this will keep it straight, and it'll help you center the next pieces so that they look more even on your finished project, because, you know, if this was a real sled, they would have had that all leveled out and even for your comfort when sitting on it, for the design, all that good stuff. So we do have now these final planks that go in the middle, and like I said, we're just kind of eyeballing how wide this is, and we're adding some glue onto our foil. This foil holds up to glue fairly well as far as having glue placed on it. And when I line this up, I'm also thinking, oops, stuck to my finger. I'm also thinking not just about where to center it on the metal piece, but having these edges be somewhat level, right? Because you're going to have the sled needs to look a certain way. And yeah, I think I put this one upside down, so not a big deal. We'll just turn it over. I think it should have been on this side. Just so you guys know, they are not labeled, right? Like they don't, these aren't labeled when you pull them off your die cutter, so it is best guess. And you just want to make sure when you line these up that you're lining up edges the best you can. These are the type of sleds that would have that curve in them, and we want to represent that curve and keep the wood planks as lined up as we can. And of course your embossed side that you've ink blended is going to be face up as well. So we'll smush this down for a second with our ink, excuse me, yeah, the block. And you can store the glue upside down so it stays ready to go. And the next thing we're going to put together are the ice skates. There are a lot of components to the ice skates. I'm going to assemble them on the black mat so you can see them better since they are a white. All right, this glue is starting to set. So, we'll make 2 of everything. So if accidents happen, there's another. All right, so just take our little slidey Cricut tool and hopefully, oh, it's starting to set. Yeah, we'll set this down on the the silicone pad now, as that's starting to dry. So the skates have a lot of components to them that you have to assemble. You've got the blades, and you've got 2 parts to each boot, and then there's some laces that look really cute on the sled as well that hang the skates off the sled, kind of off a hook there. And so you just want to grab a top and a bottom. The part with all the cutouts, that's the top. That's kind of where the shoelaces go. It's also the smaller piece. So you know that's going to be on the top for depth. Again, you can liquid glue, you can artist tack this. I'm going to liquid glue it because the liquid glue gives a little bit of wiggle room, and this needs to line up decently to make sense. And that S is making it a little hard to tell. So we'll just find a less glued down area here. All right, so you need to line the skate up so that the bottom piece is looking good and the heel. So, and then that's where the laces would run normally. They didn't have any little pieces for the lace. I guess, I don't think it really needs it. If you really felt like it did, I guess you could build something to go there if you wanted. And then we'll do the other shoe because you do need 2 shoes per sled. I used to take ice skating lessons as a kid. It's a fun sport. All right, and we'll gently line this up again. So you're lining up like the tip of the toe and the sole of the foot and the heel. And again, we're not worrying about this overspill because the silicone craft mat really, you know, you can just wipe it right up. It's wonderful liquid glue. And then we're gonna line up the skate bottoms. So the flat piece is the blade, and the front piece is where you would have the little teeth in your ice skate, like if you're a figure skater. So that needs to be in the front. We are going to put the glue on these nodules here. The little round pieces are the nodules I'm referring to. That's where the glue's gonna go. And then we're gonna set the skate directly on top. So you just have a few dabs of glue, very delicate die cut. So make sure that you've got a glue that you trust because you don't get to put tons and tons of glue on half these pieces. And then you just want to pick it up. The heel is going to go on the back one, and then you've got one where the ball of the foot is and one where the toes are on this skate. And then we can put a block down to kind of help flatten it out. And that's what your skate's gonna look like. A little bit stuck to the block now with the static. So that's a finished skate. And like I said, we need 2 of those for this card, so I'm going to put the skate on the other one. And just on the little nodules. And if you're anything like me, you are probably covered in glue right about now. And we'll line up tip of the toes, the heel, and the ball of the foot on here. And these are going to need a minute to set up, so, oh, this one's already come off. So I'm just going to re-glue this. We'll move it to a different section here. The glue has come off. You can't just glue the back of the skate yet because only these 3 little pieces touch the back of the foot, so if you were to glue the whole thing, you'd have a bunch of extra glue all over the place. You want to save that for later on when we go to attach this to the card. So we'll line it up, press it down, smash it down real good, really attach it. All right, and wipe up the extra glue. All right, so now we've got the pieces for an entire card assembled. Let's talk about how we want this card to look. I have an embossed brick background. This is a retired folder from Stampin' Up. It's 3D. I actually want to keep this white because I want the sled to be the focus of my card, but I didn't want to just put the sled on the card directly. I wanted to have a little something something. So the card is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I want to have a little bit of a border around it. And I regularly test out all my folders and keep extras around in white of these textured pieces. So I'm going to cut this down to 4 by 5 1/4, which is going to leave me an 1/8 inch border around each side, because that's a 1/4 inch per total side that we're going to take off via the trim, which will be an 8 inch around. So I'm going to grab a card base and I'm going to flip this over. I'm going to use some glue runner tape around the edges and back up again. I'd like this to pop up extra, so I have some extra cardstock scraps that I keep around. These are offcuts, and I kind of pick one that's pretty similar in size to my project. I cut it down a little, and you can use foam, but oops, I cut a little too much off. Thing is that the scraps, if you're not using them, it doesn't really matter the color, if it's the exact same white or not. It can be a little bit different. These are going to give a more even lift than like a few foam dots in different spots. If you had a foam sheet that you were putting down and everything was 100% the same, it's going to be more like that. It's going to give the project a nice lift and pretty color, or pretty depth, I mean. And we'll just glue that really well and give it a little bit of a pop-up. Make sure the card is opening where you want, and then we'll lay this down so that there's a bit of a border, a little bit harder to see with the white. And let's start assembling. So we've got our sled piece here, and I'm probably going to put my sentiment across the middle of this sled. You don't have to put a sentiment, but you probably want to, potentially. So I'm going to flip this sled over, and see, there's a lot of surface area. I can put glue on this, so I'm going to just run my tape runner. It's quick, it's easy, and some of these planks are quite large, and I ran out of tape runner. Let me get another. Alright, we got another tape runner, so we can continue taping this. Even on the narrower pieces, I will kind of dab the tape runner. And at the top, I love tape runner. This is my favorite type of adhesive. I flip it over and I take my little Cricut tool and I kind of scrape down the sides where I see a little bit of extra glue, because I want to get that behind the paper as best as possible or off of it, so that we're not having to adhesive eraser it later from the card. Only a couple spots, that's not too bad. Now, depending on what kind of card you're making, you could use this to your advantage to get glitter to stick in small, narrow sections. So that's a thought too. not where we're going with the sled, but all right, making sure the card is still upright. Gonna keep this somewhat centered, but a little bit higher, so centered across, slightly high on the vertical. I'm gonna glue this sled down like he's on the wall, and then we're gonna build this. So first you're gonna have a couple skates hanging off of this, and then there'll be some leaves, and then on top of the leaves is a poinsettia. Then we're gonna go through and fill in all these nodules that are left visible with these liquid pearls in the color pewter. So sorry, let me move my card up so you can see better. Slide across all the extra pieces here. Now, before you start with the skate, you're gonna want the little skate shoestrings. I am gonna artist tack this. It's going to pick up more glue than it needs because it's very fine, but that's okay. We can erase whatever we don't need later. We are stacking things on top of this, so if it's got a little extra glue, it's probably not going to be the end of the world on this specific project. So we're going to loop the skate around this top center nodule, and then bring those shoelaces down, or skate laces. Then for the skate itself, I'm flipping them over on the back, and I'm going to tape runner these because they are a bit larger. And you'd want to hook one skate per shoelace. They are going to overlap a little, so you want to get it glued and ready to go, and then figure out where the overlap is going to be. So I'm going to need, like, this section's going to need an extra sheet of paper to stay relatively level with the card. So I'm going to go back to my handy dandy scrap, and so you can see this. It's basically this back heel. So then I'm going to cut this a little bit skinnier than it currently is. And just lay it down here towards the heel and then snip it. I don't want people to see this from the front, but I want it to be like a little bit higher because I've got cardstock underneath here, and not a foam dot. So if I put a foam dot, it's going to stick up an awful lot, and I don't want it to stick up that much on this card. So then we'll just tape the extra sheet of paper we gave in there, and we'll lay the skate down. So they'll be, as you can see, now the skates are somewhat level. That's going to make the card easier to ship. There is some glue here, so you just take your eraser. We're not going to put anything on top of the skate, and you just very gently rub in circular motions until you get these little beads of adhesive, and those come right up. They will clean up your card. The adhesive's gonna give your card kind of a dingy look if you get it somewhere, because it's gonna attract all the fuzzies and whatnot. So it can also stick to your envelope if you're not super careful with where it's located. All right, I have a piece of sled here that's not really adhered, so I am going to put a little liquid glue here and weight that down because the sled absolutely needs to be adhered to the card. Sometimes it's a little more challenging to adhere onto 3D. You don't want to push too hard because you don't want to flatten out the bricks. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put on some tree leaves. And I'm gonna honestly just glue this part here where the branch is. I'm not gonna worry about the rest of the leaves because this is a bottom layer. And I only want 2 of these, and I'm kind of lining up the edge of the leaf with that top point where we're gonna center everything. That's where there's gonna be a lot of glue going down, and it'll kind of hold everything together. Didn't accidentally get a little extra glue on this one, so we'll put the pine boughs down. The skate's lace already coming up a little, so this stuff has a mind of its own sometimes. I like the tape adhesive best because I think it sticks better initially because the liquid you have to wait for it to dry. Alright, so we're kind of lined up and centered here. with our pine boughs. Now we're going to add the holly, and I did not trim these branches earlier. You can trim them to your liking. If you want them, keep them. I don't like the extra pieces on there, so I'm going to trim them off mine. And I'm just following with the leaf basically and cutting off the edge. And then I'm going to glue down with my tape runner. Oops, tape runner is eating this one, it's so little. Alright, we'll glue down with the tape runner and run the fingers around the edges to kind of seal in the extra glue. And I'm going to point these slightly upward just to have a different, if you point them all downward, they're all going to overlap. So you want to have them pointing a few different directions here. And this one split open, that's not good. So we'll dab some liquid glue in here. A lot of mistakes can be fixed, so don't stress over some of these errors. Like glue dot, it didn't tear my paper, it just pulled it open. We can absolutely put more glue on there. There's already glue on the back, that's how it tore, so once we push this down, it'll be nice and glued in there, so no one will ever know, and it won't impact the final product of the card. So these are our leaf bases. We are going to add some poinsettia, and I'm honestly probably going to liquid glue this one. We've already got some of the micro glues on every other leaf. You can add liquid glue on top, that's not a big deal. And so we're going to flip this over, center this right over top of everything else, pressing down. This is our skate card. Now, as promised, there are some pieces that we need to cover up that I just didn't want to do the tiny little dies. So I've got this great bottle of pewter liquid pearls. You just want to run it between your hands, kind of like a nail polish, to reincorporate all the colors if it looks like it's separating. You can shake it too, but if you do it between your hands, there's less chance of air bubbles coming out. I'm going to recommend starting this either directly on your silicone sheet or on scrap paper. That way, if there is an air bubble, you don't end up with some humongous splotch on your completed card, because we just spent a lot of time building this. So coming over on scratch, getting it started. Everywhere I see a little hole, I'm going to add one of these dots. This is the screw that holds the sled together. And they've given us a real nice guideline there, not just for assembling with those dots, but also for finishing. And that's much faster and easier. We'll wipe off the tip of that before you seal it so it doesn't glue itself shut. That's much faster and easier than trying to work with that small of a sheet of paper. And I just drop the card a few times and tap around the edges to try and encourage that to lay flat, tap underneath it. These liquid pearls glue, it dries, it does not flatten out when it dries. So you're gonna have that depth the whole time with the card. And for the center of the poinsettia, I wanted to put a little crystal into there. All right, so I've got a couple different crystals here. I'm just gonna pick the size that I think looks the best, and then I'm gonna grab my tweezers. These are already got adhesive on them, and just slide it right off with the tweezers and put a crystal down in the center. Now, I did have all these different snowflakes cut out to see if we wanted on like a background. I think it's gonna be too busy with everything going on, so I'm actually gonna leave the snowflakes off this card this time and save them for another project. The only thing we're missing here is a sentiment. I've left a spot for mine, and you don't have to put a sentiment if you don't want to. You can easily slide this down and leave it as is, centered in the card, and finish it like that and let it be any sentiment. I am going to grab a sentiment strip though and stamp it on a tag and add that on. Alright, we are going to add a sentiment to this. I found Have a Magical Christmas. It fits really well into the stitched tag. And I'm going to stamp it in real red ink so that it matches the poinsettia and brings the color down to the bottom of the card. So we'll lightly tap, and we'll line up the tag straight. The stamp has grids, so you can line the stamp up with the grids, and then you'll gently press the stamp in the center, closing up the ink pad so we don't ruin the new card. And you got a magical Christmas there. I'm going to take a roll of foam tape on this one and plop it up. Just make sure it's a little bit dry. You don't want to smudge it. And we'll cut off a length of tape about the length of this strip, placing it down the center so that the whole strip will survive the mail. And then we'll center it underneath the sled. And there we go, week 2 of the Christmas card, and it is ink blended and die cut, and we've got some sparkles and some liquid pearls on there. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you like this, please subscribe, turn on notifications so that you can see my future videos, and I'd love to hear your comments on what you think of this card and if you would have done it any differently. Have an awesome day.